Welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, it's part of the show. Didn't they teach you to reach for the stars while opening up the bars and keeping you chained down with mortgage bills and cars? Vaccines for your arms, kids sounding like supercharged, caffeinated hate-filled scars and rage-quit repertoires. No answers for yards, caught up in emotion that's not even yours. Imposter truths like impeccable retards, lined up for your serving of Gish Gallop and wars. No remedy can't save the lost, in love with the yarn. I'm tired of walking into refracted shards, poor science displayed by disgusting bards. Soaked in sin with your dupe is delight in a new hand of cards. Been so long, seems like for love I'm just too hard, I'm just too hard, that's it. Welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, you don't know. Intoxicated 8 makes you believe you're spinning in space while you have no shame or grace. It's a disdainful state I used to contemplate how to save myself from my own self-hate. Wonder why I was even made with a dreadful fate, forced to try and awake with a full plate. No one to help me stay awake or educate. I've had to liberate and fight through hidden gates. But my brother, heaven could never be late, and rockets don't work in space. It's all fake, the show is on Mars. It's a joke, but you're too far gone, it won't be long. Fepe's beak is strong. We have our song and we march along like streams of knowledge leading to God's holy pond, and lives of truth that hits the bong and sings the song, turns mankind from the wrong. We come in peace with a holy gown and all of us wearing our holy crowns. Said the earth is flat and we probably just won't get along, just to go along. I said, welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, you don't know.
Welcome back to another exciting adventure of Red Hen Radio. I'm your host, Travis Finlay. I have to apologize for not getting this episode out earlier, this follow-up part 2 for my time with Jason Lindgren of Secrets of Saturn and Crow 777 Radio. I had a pretty hefty week last week. I was coming off the wave of being arrested, and I plan on publishing a little more information on that, and as well as my journey, but here's a little foretaste of what's to come.
Yeah. I think it was intimidating. I don't know that he would have smashed the window. I think it was all for show, you know, to get me to hand over my license, whatever.
Flexing his muscles, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. So when they arrested you...
So they arrested me, put me in the back of the cruiser, took me to the local precinct. You'll like this, okay? You'll like this. So this is so funny. I haven't told anybody this. You're the first one.
Okay.
So he brings me the end, they take my my property, they log my property, how much money I had, and this, that, and the other. And then they take me down the hallway and they bring me into the cell. And as he's closing the cell, I start, swing low, sweet chariot,
Wow.
come and Lord carry me home.
And my inspiration for this act of hubris was this 1985 movie.
Swing low, sweet chariot.
I'll have it, come here.
Coming for to carry me home. Can't keep me here, Chief.
All right, as I said, I am in the process of compiling and editing the information that I am going to be releasing. I've been talking to a few people that I think have some really interesting ideas, and I don't even know what to say other than the fact that I think that it's going to be very sensible. You know, the maxim of this channel, trust your senses. Common sense is one of our senses, and when you hear this stuff, you just think, this is just common sense. And if there is a simple way of addressing these issues in our court system, I think we need to know about it. And so that's what those subsequent episodes are going to be for us. So I hope you look forward to that. In the meantime, please make sure, if you have not done it yet, so if you have not yet done so already, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that share button, and also the bell notification so that you can be kept up to date with Red Hen Radio. In the meantime, here's Jason.
Does all that make sense, the way I'm going with that?
It makes complete sense, and you are okay. So I'm 46, and I'm just thinking, man, what the hell am I going to do with the rest of my life, knowing what I know, and where I'm at right now is taking the first step with you. I mean, I want to research. I want to perform the task of a journalist. Because this whole, everything, even what you just touched on with the Federal Reserve and I mean, a year ago, man, I was a full-blown sheeple. Full-blown, man. I wasn't a NASA fanboy. I wasn't a media hound, but I believed whatever they said. You know what I mean? Or I didn't think about it, I didn't consider it, but I didn't doubt it, per se. You know what I mean? So, going back to 9/11, I remember George Bush saying, we're not going to tolerate conspiracy theories. And, I mean, it just didn't, I just didn't think about it. I remember hearing people question it or people saying people are questioning 9/11 and they think that it was fabricated because of, an oil grab and whatnot. But it just didn't click for me, It just didn't click for me.
Right.
And in this past year, I could say that I have probably swallowed like 20 red pills, because the flat Earth was the first one. I mean, I would legitimately say, except for the fact that, I mean, Kennedy, I think, was more obvious to me as a conspiracy theory, but I didn't have an opinion, and I don't know that I cared. But a year ago, and it wasn't YouTube, I was listening to a sermon where the guy was a flat earther, and in his sermon, and I didn't know that, and in his sermon he comes out and says to his congregation, you guys all know that I'm a flat earther, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what? But he used it in his example, in his sermon, he gave a logical explanation of Coriolis. And I was driving in my truck, and I just was thinking, holy shit, that totally makes sense. That makes sense. And I was in. And so, yeah, I mean, there's just so much. You, like I said, your channel with Crow and you and the guy and the stuff that you guys talk about with history and everything, I just think I have got so much work to do. Crazy.
Well, that's why we do what's there. And I would never say put stock in anyone. I totally believe in what Bill Cooper said, where do your own homework, you know. So I'm right there with that concept. But if you believe in us enough that you think we're telling you the truth, at least we're giving you something to work from. And that's what I try and do. I would never say take our word as gospel. I would never tell anyone that. I say take a look at what we're saying, how we put things together, how we challenge a particular subject, and then you have your own basis to work from. Like, oh, I heard these points on this topic, so at least I have this to work from now. Instead of having to do your research from absolutely nothing, we've already done some of that for you. And you can go and find out for yourself if there's a there there.
No, I completely agree. And the interesting thing about it is that our own education system in terms of indoctrination, I think is intended to produce results where people don't question authority.
Well, that's an absolute.
We
the
simply
systems are their own problem, right from the get go. That's a whole topic in and of itself.
And we might have those kinds of questions, which is why we raise our hand in class, and depending on how obstructive the teacher is, it's either a fruitful discussion or it gets shut down. But my point is that most of us are not investigators naturally, so that we just default to the authority. You know, I don't have time to study this. This isn't my field. This is what this guy says. He studies it. So what he probably says is true. And so we do that with mainstream media as well. I mean, we just simply sit back and we'd like to think that we're not just stupid couch potatoes. And at the same time, we then get into channels like yours where we have the ability to process what you're saying and with our own senses, with our own logic, with our own empirical experience, process and say, I think there's a there there. I think what they're saying has validity. And then it just depends upon me. Like I said, you know, I've got now impetus and interest in doing my own research because, well, let's say go back to the episode where you guys had Alphonse on, and so I've had some correspondence with Alphonse because in that part of the year, I think it was early in the year, but I purchased with cash 2 different automobiles, and I have yet to register them. And they've both been towed, and I've had to get them out of Hawk. And so I have, and that's been my first step toward challenging the system. And, you know, I am in the process of trying to figure out whether or not how I'm going to do litigation to receive damages. So Alphonse was like, man, you got to sue these guys. You got to sue the tow truck driver. You got to sue the police officer. You got to sue the owner of the company that towed your car. Just do it and see what happens. You know, and list this for your damages and list this for your damages. So I'm researching that. I'm trying to look and make sure that I'm, you know, crossing my T's and dotting my I's. But at the same time, I also have the citations to fight. So I've, you know, applied with motions to dismiss to the traffic court. And so I'm in the process of doing that right now. But that's all due to, you know, channels like yours and people like Alphonse that have come on and have said, look, you know, we've got enough knowledge to understand that there's something here for us to take a stand against. And so, for what it's worth.
Right, and I encourage people to do that if you're willing to accept the consequences,
right,
positive or negative.
Right.
You have to choose your own battles. For instance, this is a perfect example for this. Everybody with half a brain who's looked into this knows that income taxes are actually not justified There's no legal actual standing to have to pay income taxes. But you really want to fight that battle. If you do, great. I totally respect you. Is it worth it most of the time for most people, especially if you're barely eking by? Do you think you're going to have the time and the money to fight that behemoth of a system? Probably not. And I don't diss anyone for paying their taxes, for income taxes specifically. I mean, taxes, otherwise, that's a whole other argument. But the income tax specifically is definitely not legal. But that's a monster that is very difficult, very, very difficult to slay, and some people certainly have. They have defeated their own personal income tax monster. But it's almost impossible. It's not impossible, but it's very close to it. And it might drain you more than it's worth to fight that. Because the one thing you can never get back, even if you've got money to spare, is time. And the amount of time you might spend in court just battling this ridiculousness, because the agents of the system will never back down. And that's something you got to know. Again, the allegory of the Matrix is perfect. You're going to have these automatons coming at you over and over and over again, because they're not going to stop. Their indoctrination into the mainstream system is so complete. They, even though they're fellow human beings, are going to do everything they can to defeat you, to put you down. So choose your battles wisely and the ones you think you can actually win. I totally respect that you're bucking the system with the car thing. But, for instance, if someone else did that and they absolutely require that vehicle to support themselves, to get to work. For instance, you're a truck driver. If you tried that with your truck and your truck got taken away from you, all of a sudden your means of supporting yourself has just been taken by the system, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. You now have to go challenge that, and you're losing time and money.
Right. Yeah. For me, it's an issue of principle. As I've thought through this, the metaphor in my mind is Tumbleweed, Arkansas. If I'm traveling west and I come to Tumbleweed, Arkansas, and I come across a town that is run by a bad guy who taxes everyone, but the only reason why they're paying him is because he's got a posse with guns, right? So then you've got that will to power over people, and you've got Clint Eastwood who comes in and says, "Why aren't you guys standing up for yourselves?" And they're like, "Well, we would rather just pay than either get shot or imprisoned."
Right. It's a battle that they don't feel justified in fighting, because the consequences of losing that battle to them are too high.
Yeah, the one thing that I think that most people who don't look at it in any way is they believe that the government is justified in taxation or in the policing of our speed limits or our taillights or, writing citations for code violations. But if we step back and say, okay, now, if I was doing that to you just on my own, would I be a criminal? Yeah, of course, you can't do that. I said, okay, so imagine I run up a credit card bill, and then I go around to all of my neighbors and say, you need to pay me $20 a month so I can pay off my debt, or else I'm going to throw you in my basement or whatever. Would I be a criminal? Yeah, you'd be a criminal. Yeah, that's what our government's doing. And that's the one thing where people are like, what are you talking about? They're not doing that. That's not what they do. And that becomes the point where you're bringing up, that's the analogy of bringing up 9/11. You're saying, okay, now look at it from this angle. Does this make sense? Or if this happened, does this make sense? So. All right.
What I say to that,
yeah,
I got something interesting that I came up with quite a few years ago, and I said this to a manager I used to work with, who I got along very well with that most of the time. And we were having a discussion on government and things like that, and I said, Peter, if you boil it all down, it comes down to this. There are no such things as governments. There are no such things as religions. There are no such things as groups of any kind. In reality, there's just people. There's just the individual. And the individual subscribes to whatever it is they want to. And as far as the government, quote unquote, the government, it's just a lot of individuals subscribing to a particular belief system. The police officer giving you that ticket completely believes that you're the enemy, and you violated what in his mind or her mind is wrong. You did something wrong, and therefore you must be punished. And believe me, there is a lot of indoctrination with police and military and all that, that it's an us and them mentality, and believe me, man, that is programmed heavily. They are them, they are their group, and that is not the same as the civilians, a whole other group. And the us and them mentality is one of the ultimate forms of control, because divide and conquer, human beings are so tribal. This is how all of these control mechanisms work. Look at religions killing each other for belief systems that cannot be physically proven. No matter how hard you try, if your life depended on it, you cannot prove it to somebody who asks for empirical evidence. Or tribes in Africa, they look exactly the same. To an outsider, it's just, well, they're all African, they're all black people. But this tribe hates this tribe, and they will maim and kill each other because of their tribal differences, whatever they might be. But even though an outsider might view it as like, but you're the same stuff, like there's no difference here. But human beings are so tribal that once that divide and conquer mentality has been set in, whatever it happens to be, they will defend it as if it's their own, because that is what they're accepting as their platform that they are standing on.
All right, so we're at an hour, and I want to wrap up a little bit. I'm going to ask a couple more questions and just see if you know how they go. If that's okay, you still have some time?
Yeah, no, I'm good, bro.
Okay. So I was listening to an interview with Max Egan yesterday. He was a guest on someone else's show, and he made the statement that he thinks that we could probably consider history valid for at least 100 to 150 years, but beyond that, he's dubious. What do you think?
Yeah, for the most part. Now, certain aspects in history, I would say stay open-minded about the validity of, like, exactly how things went down. Because, as we all know, history is a lie agreed upon by the victors. So you never know if a particular battle went a certain way or if certain things happened in an area that was reported on by only one faction. But generally speaking, I've actually said something very similar. We could probably get back to the 1800s because there's photographic evidence. You start getting before that, things start getting a little wonky. My line in the sand is usually pre-1700s, because when the Jesuits started messing around with history books and calendars and all that in the 1600s, that's when I'm really like, well, goodness only knows. If you want to go look at the work of Anatoly Fomenko, there could be hundreds of years, even maybe 1,000 years, that possibly didn't even happen, and things are just kind of stitched together in a way to make certain people look better. People, of course, in authority. So yeah, I'm right there with Max. There's a certain point where you can roughly assume things probably happened this way, but after that, you go back far enough, and all of a sudden it's really kind of up in the air. And I would say that maybe as far as the United States is concerned, back to the revolutionary times, probably those are reasonably accurate. But before that, it starts getting really hard to prove anything.
So I'm gonna just step up a little bit and challenge in a congenial way the statement, the maxim, the pithy quote that you gave us, history is a lie agreed upon, is a nice, profound way to describe something, but my investigative mind will say, prove it. Prove what you're saying. How can you validate that history is a lie agreed upon? So while I agree with you, I mean, I'm telling you, Jason, I agree with you, but at the same time, that's a statement that can be made to where people just believe it, like because you're on Crow Radio or because you're the speaker at a conference. You know, if you stood up at your conference and said history is a lie agreed upon, and a person is hearing that for the first time, the point of your talk isn't to justify necessarily. You're just throwing that nugget out there. But I guess I'm asking you, how do you know that? How do you know history is a lie agreed upon?
Well, you don't know that history is accurate at all, especially once you get back far enough, and which was the whole point of the direction we're going with this discussion. When you get back far enough, you're literally taking whatever history books exist, whatever physical evidence may still remain, that's all you've got. So while I'm not saying every single story about a certain point of history is necessarily a lie, what I'm saying is you can't prove it because there's really just not enough to go on, because you have whoever the ruling factions were at the time putting down, this is what happened, this is what we did, we defeated these people and took over their lands, whatever it happens to be. If there's no archaeological evidence to back that up, then you're taking their word for it. And for most people, that's probably good enough. But, for instance, a great example would be very early man. A lot of very fundamentalist Christians will say there were no really early men. It was the universe, the earth, all that there is was created 6,000-ish years ago. Science says otherwise, but they're firmly lodged in that belief, so to them, that's a lie. So it really depends upon your point of view, and it comes down to what evidence do you want to accept as being valid.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard, of the dinosaur hoax and things like that. So
we did a show on that.
Huh?
We did a show on that.
Sure. But I guess what I'm saying is that I've heard other channels even say, well, I question science on the whole primitive man thing. Like, there's a primitive man hoax. Like, there was never primitive man. He was never, stupid and evolved. And all I'm saying is that's, a point of interest to even consider. I'm telling you, man, this is the biggest. I don't even know if there's 10,000 rabbit holes. There's just one ginormous hole. But all right, so let's do this real quick. I want you to give me something, Jason. I want you to give me what no one else has, and I want you to tell us something that no one knows about Jason Lindgren. Tell us something, Jason.
Let me think about that for a moment. Okay. Let's try this. So the one thing people, if they are a longtime listener of the show, might know about me, but a lot of people who just might be hearing me for the first time don't know about me, and this is just a bit of trivia that's amusing, but I have a small obsession with coffee. And I don't just mean drinking gallons of the stuff every day. When I travel, which I've been doing a lot lately because of the film Shoot the Moon that we're making, everywhere I go, I like to find the unique mom-and-pop coffee shops that roast their own beans and bring back home what I call little bags of treasure. So everywhere I go, I hunt down new places because everyone's going to be unique. No matter where they're buying their beans from, that's going to be unique, mixed with the way that they do their preparation is unique. And there's been a couple little gems I found throughout my travels that I will now return to time after time if I go back to that city. And that it's kind of like a little game I play. And I've always wanted to write a book once I've really got enough under my belt to justify it about all these wonderful places I've gone to so that people can literally have a coffee table book of, oh, I'm going to Austin. I should go to Summer Moon Cafe because of this sounds awesome the way this person describes it in the book, that I should try this. That kind of thing. So that's kind of my outside the conspiracy, even while I'm doing the conspiratorial kind of work, going the places I go to talk to people and do all that kind of stuff. That's my little fun thing I do everywhere I go.
All right, that wraps up my initial conversation with Jason Lindgren. While this is a bit of a shorter episode, I'm going to extend it with a follow-up conversation he and I had on the phone just this week after my arrest. So, here you go.
So I was looking at that file, and I was just not doing anything. I was just sitting there looking at the screen. I'm like, I have got to get out of here because I was just so stressed out. And then you text, and like, I totally forgot about Jason. I said, but I'm not gonna blow him off. I'm not gonna say I can't talk or anything like that. So I decided to come and get outside and get some fresh air and whatnot in the in-between time. So let's see. How did I? Oh yeah, I said that I wanted to start my recording, which we did. We're being recorded. And so anyway, yeah. So back to the whole thing with the P900. So again, that's the one thing that I figured out is that as I've made observations and looked with my eyes, when I see a ship get so small into the distance, at that point, that's where the baller will say, that's where it's going over the curve. And I'll say, that's fine, but you're not seeing it. You can't see that. You can't say, I'm watching the hull disappear first. No, you're not. No, you're not. You can't see that. You don't have that. You don't have Superman's eyes. There's no way you can determine and distinguish those kinds of details. So that's the first thing. So the whole thing when you're watching, if you're looking at this for the first time and you hear a flat earther say, "We can bring the ship back over the curve," that's just sleight of hand. We're using the language of bringing it back over the curve, but we need to be honest with our viewers and say, look, all we're doing is zooming into where it is. We're not bringing it back. We're going to it. And
right, you're getting more sight because of a very high quality zoom lens.
Sure. Well, right now there is, like I was saying before, across the bay, I've shot at different temperatures and different seasons, summer, fall, and right now. And in November, I had the most clarity of the atmosphere than I ever had before, and I could see straight to the shoreline at 6 miles. Okay.
Now, I don't know that equation off the top of my head, so am I to take it that is further than you should be able to see with your eyes?
I shouldn't be able to see... Oh, well, no, okay. No. I couldn't see the shoreline with my eyes. Although I suppose you could say I could. It was there. I just couldn't distinguish it. So right now when I look over, I have a favorite little spot across the bay that comes... There's the light... Where I'm at, there's a lighthouse right now. So I've shot from both sides of the bay. And there's a 3-story red copper house that's over there, and there's a pavilion. So I drive over to the other side. It's like a half-hour drive around the bay, and I shoot back and forth just to show the differences in the atmosphere. But that's all that I'm displaying right now. All that I'm showing you is that you can see this house, like I just shot right now when I was talking to you just a minute ago. And the atmosphere, even though it's like 40, maybe 40 degrees out right now, there's a lot of distortion in the atmosphere. I couldn't distinguish the house. Like if you showed me a picture of the house, I wouldn't have thought that was the same house. And yet in November, with warmer temperatures, I had a clear shot, beautiful, crystal clear. So with my eyes, yes, I can see straight across. And the shoreline is there, but my eyes aren't accurate enough to make those distinctions. So then you zoom in with the camera, and you can see the shoreline. But on the curve, that shoreline should be like 10 feet gone. I shouldn't see the shoreline. I can still see the house, yeah. I can still see the bottom of the house because it's 20 feet high. But I shouldn't see the shoreline. And I can.
Right.
And it's only 6 miles. You know what I mean? So while we have these awesome shots of like, look, 200 plus miles infrared. Yeah, okay. Why do you have to even do that? Just show them 6 miles. It doesn't even work at 6 miles. But the interesting thing that I did in one of my videos, and I'll just talk you through it real quick, was I went where I was. I did a panoramic from left to right. Okay? So I shot the water. I'm like, look, the water right here for me, here it is. I'm standing at the water's edge. It's level away from me. It's going away from me at a level, right? Flat, except for the ripples and whatnot. So then I go to the closest shoreline, and I'm like, from my shoreline to that shoreline, the water's level. Now watch the shoreline. And what I do is I pan to the right. That shoreline ends, and the farther shoreline behind it is an extension of the land because it goes, around, but it's farther away. And I make the point that shoreline is level with that shoreline, even though there's a body of water between it. And that shoreline is level with my shoreline, even though there's a body of water between it. So I'm pointing. That's equally level, which means the water level between me and point C is level as well. Now, let's keep going. And I keep panning. The shoreline continues to move away from me, so the distance is greater, but it's the same shoreline. It's not changing its elevation. And then I go even farther. So then I do the same thing where I say, okay, now look, watch. Here's this shoreline is now going to drop away, and there's a farther shoreline 2 miles away from that one. That's all level. It's all level. But you would have to say to me that shoreline that I'm looking at 6 miles away and the farther shoreline that I can get, which is now 9 miles away, that there's curvature between us. But if you just think about it logically, you have to suspend your common sense and insert curve. You have to do that, because if you were to just look at it, you'd go, yeah, I mean, you're right. That's what it should be. But it's not, because the earth is curved. It's just absolutely, the cognitive dissonance. It's just amazing. Which is why I think it's easy to be patient with people, because you have to understand that unless they're being, talking about even the system of government and the racketeering that happens between the police department and garages that have tow trucks.
Oh, yes. Oh, we could talk about that if you'd like. I know a good bit about how they get us on that stuff.
Well, I'm living proof. I've had 3 different situations where the tow company has stolen my property, and I go in, I'm going, look, guys, where's the warrant? Where's the warrant from the judge that gives you permission to steal my property? And they're like, well, the police department, they always use us. I'm like, I don't give a shit. The police, did you verify with the cops that they were doing things legally? Did you ask them, say, okay, the next time Officer Jerkoff says, come and tow this car, you should say, where's the warrant? I'm not going to tow this car without a warrant, sir. But you're not going to do that because you want to make money. Anyway,
yep.
My point was, it's like the whole Masonic level thing, right? You get this peon cadet who comes in, he's like gung-ho and ready to serve and protect. He has no clue. And then all of a sudden one day he's like, wait a minute. So we're authorizing this tow, but we don't have a warrant. Everybody else is doing this. I guess it's okay. I mean, what do I know? This is calls for legal.
Oh, I think you're overthinking it, Travis. I don't think they even think about that.
Right. But my point is, in terms of contrasting it with a baller, you've got people who don't think about the system and believe it. And you've got certain people that critique the system and ignore what they know is common sense and apply the system. And then you've got the upper level that knows the system is incorrect and they perpetuate the lie so intentionally. So there's that gradation of involvement. And so when you're talking about people that live next to you, they're not in on the deceit. They just are. They have the cognitive dissonance. They can't make sense of what you're telling them because they're operating within the system. So all of that whole rant was just to talk about the fact that it's easy to be patient with sheeple because, first of all, I was once one, and second of all, it's cognitive dissonance. You know, if you understand that it doesn't make sense, you can't be angry with a person if they don't get it. You know what I mean? That's just abusive.
Oh, yeah.
So, anyway. So,
I'm with you, man.
But, yeah, so I'm walking back to the apartment right now. I mean, if you want to maybe talk about the 2 points that I was interested in learning, and I don't know if you want to use a springboard of the secrets of Saturn and just kind of talk a little bit about what that means to you and what took you down that trail.
So a few years ago, well, I should probably back up from that even, I have been studying a lot of this stuff for many years, pretty much starting after 9/11. That was like, I wouldn't say a wake-up call because I was suspicious about things in the 90s when I was young in my 20s, but seeing the shenanigans around 9/11 was the thing that made me start really hardcore looking at stuff. And being the way I am, I started trying to find the source of all this, discovering things about the elite, for lack of a better way of putting it, and all that. And of course, it all comes back to this crazy cult of death, Saturn worship stuff. At least a lot of it does. And it all ties together. But a few years ago, I decided to do my own podcast. And what was I really trying to do? I was trying to discover the secrets of Saturn because they use all this Saturn symbolism. So that's where that came from. At the same time, I started writing music, my own music, a new group of music, I should say, because I've been a songwriter for a long time. But I decided to do a new project, and I called that Cult of Saturn. And that was because, one, it sounded like a trippy 60s name, and I'm a big fan of the 60s rock and roll style, but also that if anybody heard any of the songs I like and they Googled, or I should say searched, I hate to say use Google as a verb, that they wouldn't just find a rock and roll band if they looked up the term Cult of Saturn. They would find a whole bunch of other stuff. And, of course, I would lace in information in the lyrics without being blatant about it, just to try and educate. So the podcast was the hit you over the head hard with the info stuff, doing direct interviews with people I chose to do so with, and the music was the subtle way of de-indoctrinating people and waking them up. And I still have that plan in mind. It's just very, very difficult to put a band together with awake folks when I can't really find hardly any. So I've got plenty of music written, plenty of equipment to play it with, nobody to do it with.
Huh. That's interesting because you think about Rage Against the Machine or Tool, and you seem to have people who are collective and have the same mindset, so they're out there, right? It's just being in the right place at the right time to, it's so funny. I mean, even I'm thinking of the Cult of Personality. Who sang that back in the 80s? Information Society? Was that Information Society?
No, it'll come to me in a moment.
Cult of Personality. You know what I'm talking about, though. But that's
yeah.
That Cult of Personality song is, the mother of Rage Against the Machine song. To me, Wake Up. Living Color. That's right. So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, they're out there, right? They're out there. So you don't have any music published or accessible for us to listen to?
Oh, actually, I do. You can look up the EP I put out with a few musician friends of mine from a few years back, done on my old equipment, and go, oh my God, does it sound like it compared to what I have now? I built a very nice studio in the intervening years, but yeah, you can look up Cult of Saturn, and I put out a 6-song EP called Sanctum Sanctorum, and that's Latin for the holiest of holies, and if anybody's Catholic, they may know where I got that from. But in reality, where I got that from, there's a story to that,
all right,
too, if you'd like, I could share.
Yeah, oh, no, I want all the stories we can get, and this is just free, stream of consciousness discussion. So let's go back to things. I want to ask you about the term itself. What did you call it? The cult of death, or how did you phrase that?
Death cults and all that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you just threw that term out, so how did you discover that term? I mean, you didn't know it before you started looking into these things, and you came across it. Can you kind of flesh that out a little bit?
Well, I knew a little bit about things just because, for instance, things from World War II, the Nazis were into a lot of these death cults and things like that. I had some what would be considered occult knowledge beforehand, because I've been looking at things like that since I was a teenager. But the advent of the internet was wonderful, and I like to soak up information like a sponge soaking up water. So the whole 9/11 time period was very advantageous, because that was when, late 90s, early 2000s is when the internet really took off and people were putting all this info out. And then I started discovering some of the major personalities like Jordan Maxwell and things like that. And while I don't agree with everything he says when he goes off about lizards and space aliens, his more down-to-earth-ish kind of information, if you will, even though it's not all down to earth, is very, very good, and I took it and ran. So I got a lot of early directions pointed to me from people like that. I didn't discover Bill Cooper till later on, till long after he was dead. But quick recommendation for everybody, by the way, although Bill Cooper's super early stuff where he was talking about UFOs is complete bunk, which he himself admits to later on, he did a 42 or 43-part episode called the Mystery Babylon series, which I have gone through many, many times over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you've never heard of it, I can't recommend that enough. I've fact-checked a lot of that information over time, and that's like getting a master's degree in this kind of information. You want to know about the elite and all the symbolism and all that? Fantastic. Takes time to go through it, but you're going to learn a whole heck of a lot. And the first episode starts with 2001: A Space Odyssey, so you are getting a phenomenal... Yeah, you're getting a phenomenal education in that first hour episode. But anyway...
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. When I... just to interject real quick, if anybody's out there and they haven't seen Space Odyssey 2001, I actually recommend reading it. If you like to read, go ahead and read it. As a truck driver, I have more time to listen. And one of my favorite readers, his name is Dick Hill. He reads Space Odyssey 2001, and I think he does a fantastic job. So I listened to it. And then I was also listening to, just by chance, right, random synchronicity, I was listening to A Wrinkle in Time, and which is all about time travel and parsecs and tesseracts and, all this kind of stuff. And it's a really fantastic trilogy in and of itself that Disney capitalized on last year and put Oprah Winfrey in, and I was just about to go on a shooting rampage. But so after I listened to Space Odyssey 2001 and Wrinkle in Time, it happened, synchronicity, that Interstellar was released. And Interstellar, in my opinion, is a marriage of A Wrinkle in Time and Space Odyssey. Elements in those stories are a part of. So if you don't have Space Odyssey or A Wrinkle in Time in your back pocket and you watch Interstellar, you'll still appreciate it and enjoy it as a good movie. And there's so many. So yeah. So then I had Space Odyssey in my back pocket, and when I came across Bill Cooper and started watching his Babylon series, I was just blown away. It was amazing. So now, he tells the story when he was in the Navy, I think he was in the Navy, of seeing a spaceship come out of the water. Now, you said something about the UFO stuff that he talked about being not so authentic. Is that something that you would disagree with as well, that his account of watching a spaceship come out and reporting it to his captain, and his captain saying, you guys didn't see anything?
Right, that's his USO experience that he spoke about many times over his life. I don't discount that because obviously none of us can prove it. That's not quite what I was referring to. He did a lot of real hokey stuff in the 80s, late 80s, into the early 90s, and then he started really shifting into the whole conspiracy / militia side of things. And that's the era you really want to get into, the 93, 94-ish, all that. He even points out that Alex Jones is a major shill that early on and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I would discount anything if you see super early stuff where he's yapping about UFOs and space aliens, all stuff like that. Now, the USO experience seems to be the thing that made him question how things are done with the government and all that, because he didn't know before that. So I think that may have been a very legitimate experience for him. At least it seems authentic and genuine, the way he comes off. So, I mean, it just is what it is. You have to I've had experiences, and I don't talk about them a lot because you can't prove these things. They're your own personal experiences, and I can tell you all day long, but I can't prove it to you. So I personally usually just keep quiet about it, but I've seen some crazy stuff. And that's that. It is what it is. Take it and let it affect you in a positive way to open your mind. That's what I always say. Those experiences were for me. They opened my mind at a very youthful age because I was very young when these things happened, and it helped shape my worldview, and maybe that's what they were there for.
Yeah. All right, so I interrupted you. I'm sorry, but you were talking about Bill Cooper and Babylon, and the last thing I think you mentioned before I jumped on it was the Space Odyssey.
By the way, something very important about 2001: A Space Odyssey that I don't know if you caught or not, because I've read the book and, of course, seen the movie several times, which has a very creepy feel to it, by the way, in my opinion. Did you notice that in the novel by Arthur C. Clarke, who I don't even need to go into that if anybody is aware of who Arthur C. Clarke really is.
Yeah.
But in the novel of 2001: A Space Odyssey that he wrote to go along with the script of the movie with Stanley Kubrick,
right.
In the novel they are going not to Jupiter. They are going to Saturn.
Yeah.
So we have a black monolith around Saturn. Well, that's awfully like the black cube of Saturn, isn't it? Think they were revealing a little too much there, and they got slapped on the wrist and said, no, you're just saying too much. I don't know. But the claim is that they couldn't make the rings look realistic special effects in the mid-'60s when they were developing this film. I accept that that's a reasonable possibility, but I have to say that the rest of the special effects of the planets and all that look groundbreaking for the time period, that's for sure.
Yeah, so, okay. I know absolutely nothing about what you're talking about. So, school me. I don't know what this cult of Saturn is. I don't get it. Okay, let's go back. Galileo invents, allegedly, the telescope. So,
right.
As far as I know, up to that point, no one can see the rings of Saturn. You can't see them with your eyes. You just can't. So, where does this start? Where does this come from? I don't get where it's going to begin, where you start having a cult of Saturn. I mean, is Saturn as a concept completely disassociated with the wandering star that we call Saturn? So are we talking about the origin of the concept and then the association of a star, and then they get married? Is the star first? Is the concept first? Is the cult of death first, and then you bring Saturn? I don't even know. It's just like, it's like talking to somebody about astrophysics, and they're like, yeah, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Well, that's very interesting because I've tried to figure that out myself. How on earth did people thousands of years ago know that Saturn had rings?
Right.
And it has been tied to such things as wedding rings being a bond between your lover and the god Saturn, and all those kinds of things, earrings so that you can hear what the god Saturn. This has all been attributed, and if that's true, then how on earth did they possibly know this? So did they have technology to see that we just aren't aware of? I don't know. I haven't been able to find that answer because I really want to know, but there are indications that they seem to know that. Now, there's a lot of more mythological kind of stuff that suggests that Saturn used to be really large in our sky, that the solar system, as it were, was very different at the time, which, of course, rocks hard against a lot of the things that people are challenging these days about the bodies just being luminaries and all that, that we're in a contained system. So it's all conjecture. All I can tell you is that there are a lot of mythologies that revolve around Saturn and Saturn being usurped by Jupiter and the ages changed and all that. That seems to be a thing, but what exactly the ancients knew and how they knew it, I would love to know.
So talk about that a little bit. LIGO allegedly determined gravitational waves because of a copulation act of two black holes millions of years ago. right? So
wait, okay.
You know what I mean? The two black holes and that merger of the two black holes created a gravitational wave that LIGO discovered last year, I think it was, or sometime in the past couple of years. They discovered gravitational waves, and they attributed that gravitational wave that they detected. They said, this gravitational wave that we just detected is the result of two black holes smashing into each other millions of years ago. And you're like, how do you even know that? That could have been a butterfly fart across the Atlantic that just came your way. So my question is, in terms of how do we evaluate the suggestion that Saturn used to be closer and larger? What is the basis for that, for saying that? Is that an historical record that we're saying we have a cuneiform tablet and the way that it looks as if they're trying to tell us that Saturn was bigger? Or, you know what I mean? It's like, is it just conjecture? Because if you're just throwing out conjecture on astronomy, that I have no interest in that, because you can say anything you want. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference. It's not like telling me, we know that this tree fell on this house because we can see it. There it is. There's the evidence. Okay, I can work with that. But if you're going to tell me, you know what, Saturn used to be a lot closer. How do you know that? Just stop. How do you even begin? So one of the things that I thought of, because I'm a Christian, and this whole thing has thrown my entire existence into just blah. Okay? Now, I'm just trying to be honest. I'm holding on to my tradition, but I'm holding on loosely. So, when I think through and when I teach the Bible and we talk about Genesis 1, right? No one was there at the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and on and on and on. Day 1, day 2, day 3, okay? No one was there. So, who's writing this? And where did he get his information from? Because he wasn't there. So who's telling him? So the default presupposition is God is telling Moses, this is what happened. Write this down. Did you get that? Did you need me to go back? Did you, all this kind of stuff, right? Now I'm not going to get into I'm not going to get into the historical textual criticism, blah, blah, blah. My only point is that that's my question for the firmament. Because if you say the Bible, which is what flat earthers are doing, the Bible's a flat earth book. I don't think that it is. The Bible tells us, that there's a dome. I don't think that it does. But it does talk about the rakia, which is the firmament. But my question is how did they know to describe the sky as a hammered out piece of metal, which is what rakia means? That word refers to metal that's been smithed. Okay? So why did you choose that word to describe the sky? And how did you know? So that all just completely just blows that you cannot be assertive. You cannot tell me this is what this text means because it's using this word. No, you can't tell me that. Because how did you know? So that's what you're talking about. I'm sorry if I derailed and just kind of puked all over the discussion, but that's where we're at, right? I'm asking you. Let's maybe bring it on back. Okay, so how did this whole death Saturn thing? Where did it come from? And yeah, I mean, why is a black obelisk significant in that cult? And I don't know, man. It's just so it's like a loophole, right? I'm sorry, I'm totally hijacking this. Okay, so it's like a loophole in the tax system, right? Or you think about, you go to a clothing store and you go to the discount rack and it's 99 cents. Last week it was $30. Now it's 99 cents. You could have sold it for 99 cents the entire time, right? You marked it up to make a profit, okay? That's like the loophole. Why charge me $30? Just let me have it for 99 cents because next week it's going to be 99 cents. Just give it to me now for 99 cents. Don't make me wait. So the tax loophole is, well, if you're self-employed, you can write off this and you can write off that, and you can write off this and you can write off that, and you can have less taxes. But Mary Jane Smith down the road, who's not self-employed, she can't write any of that stuff off? Nope, she can't. That's bullshit. Yes, she can. You're just saying she can't.
All right, there you have it. Thank you so much for joining me on this exciting adventure of Red Hen Radio. I'm your host, Travis Finlay. Please make sure that you subscribe, share, like, and hit that bell notification so that you can be kept up to date with Red Hen Radio. If you would like to make a comment or interact with me where I can respond, there's just no way I'm going to be able to go through any of the comments if you make them and want me to respond. I just don't have the time to do that. So feel free to email me at redhenradio. That would be radar echo delta Henry echo Nancy Nancy radio alpha delta igloo Oscar at gmail.com. redhenradio at gmail.com. And I will respond to you that way for sure. All right? So, all of that to say, if I didn't say it already, I am your host, Travis Finlay, here at Red Hen Radio, where we encourage you to trust your senses, question your sources, resist consensus. Truth is not afraid of investigation. Until next time.
Welcome to the show. If you don't know, you don't know. Didn't they teach you to reach for the stars while opening up the bars and keeping you chained down with mortgage bills and cars, vaccines for your